Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party. I'm Jarvis Davis. Coming up on today's show, the Falcons defense played exactly how they needed to.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere else but right here at Locked On. I'm Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman, and Tori McElhaney. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Guys, Falcons were looking to stack wins post-bye, and after a grimy 13-8 win at the Jets Sunday, feels like they might be on their way. We'll deep dive on the dub, incompetent or concerned, and go around the metro. But first, let's talk top three takeaways. Jarvis, your takeaway was Bud Dupree has entered the chat.
Absolutely, yes. I said this during the game, maybe tweeted out during the game. I was saying, like, he's been really strong against the run throughout the year. But, I mean, to be honest, let's keep it funky. He was brought in here to rush the passer. And I think that for him to be able to put the quarterback on the ground and just really understand, like, the type of game that it was, because we understand that the defense was needed. They needed to play that way yesterday, and they needed to, in order to get a win. So I think Bud Dupree kind of goes in line with stepping that play up and then bringing both assets of his game to the table with against the run and be able to rush the passer. I think that we saw this defense is starting to really get into a nice groove. Ryan Nielsen got these guys playing some really good football, and I think that I'm going to be the person, if I'm the only one, I'm going to have to stand up and say, hey, man, Ryan Nielsen was a good hire. This dude is doing a hell of a job in coaching this defense up, especially after a few games where we're just like, okay, what is going on here? So, yeah, got to give a shout-out to the defense and what they're doing.
And you know I have no commentary on Bud Dupree, so I'm going to move right along to Aaron. Aaron, your takeaway. The Falcons have now scored on an explosive play. Yep, sure are. And I'm going to keep it pushing because I'm not going to be petty. Aaron, the Falcons have now scored on an explosive play 3 out of 4 games, and you said that's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's when we look at this team down the stretch, right? We're hoping that this team, you know, not only just wins this terrible division that is the NFC South, but actually, like, by the end of the year, we're like, hey, you know, they're actually as good as some of these other playoff teams. They're not just there by default. And I think one of the things that you want to see this team develop is a more explosive passing game. And one of the things that was pretty crazy in the first part of this year was they didn't have any explosive play touchdowns. Like, all their scores came where they had to be like sort of methodical and get into the red zone and then score there. And then you saw the Jonnu Smith screen pass against the Vikings. You saw the Bijan Robinson touchdown catch last week against the Saints. The Saints. Out of sight, out of mind.
They were that formidable, right?
Yeah. Michael Pruitt catching the 20-yard touchdown this past weekend. And so, like, these are just different elements that this Falcons is adding to their offensive repertoire. And, you know, we talk about the quarterback play and the offensive line play and the running game. And I think if and when the Falcons get to that level where we can say, hey, this team actually deserved to make the playoffs this year, and they're not just in with a big fat asterisk next to their name because they played in a terrible division, it's going to be because I think they can do a lot of the different things that other good teams do. And one of those things is being able to dial up explosive plays that can result into points. And so I think this is something that we've seen the last couple of games, and hopefully we'll continue to see it over the next 5 games down the stretch. And I think that will be a really good litmus test to sort of tell us, okay, maybe this Falcons team is legit and not just sort of moonwalking into the playoffs because they play in a terrible division.
Yeah. And I think too, like you said, you got to be ready when your number is called. And one thing about Michael Pruitt, I mean, 85 just stays ready. Like, he stays ready. That was his only catch of the game, but that was all it took. 1 catch, 20 yards, you score, the Falcons win, point blank period. It doesn't matter how it looks. Although, Tori, it definitely looks ugly, but that said, and we kind of knew going into the game that it might have been a mucky type of game up in MetLife, but it was everything that you thought it was going to be. But then again, you said kind of nothing like you thought it would be.
Right. Yeah. So it was everything that I thought it would be in terms of the fact that the weather was so awful. Like, it was so gross. Having been there, it was, I mean, it never stopped raining, and that turf is what it is. Like, you just truly, it was one of those games that you just knew going into that it was going to be a slosh, and it was going to be whoever was going to out physical the other team was going to be the one that won. What was interesting in that is that even though this game was kind of everything you thought it would be in terms of low scoring, in terms of like offenses not being able to do much, the Falcons offense didn't necessarily play the way that I thought that they were going to play. I thought going in that this was a game that their run game would really be able to take over and establish, especially coming off a 200+ rushing yard game against the Saints, who has such a dynamic defensive front. So I was sitting there going into this game being like, okay, yeah, it's going to be a slosh. But the Falcons, with what they just did with Bijan and Tyler Algier and CP, they're going to run the ball down the Jets' throats, even though this Jets defense isn't anything to, this Jets defense is pretty good. Mm-hmm. And I still felt confident in the Falcons' run game. So the fact that it wasn't necessarily the run game because that pushed this Falcons to a victory, it was absolutely the play of, I think, the defense and, just doing a little bit more. Like and I think the Falcons just did a little bit more. It wasn't like they were, I don't know, just like overly. Yeah. Like, and so I think for me, I was just expecting more out of this run game. And I was kind of surprised that it didn't happen, that the game didn't happen that way. And that the Jets did such a good job making the Falcons beat them with Desmond Ridder throwing the ball downfield.
Yeah, I think it was more of, from the defensive side of the ball, it was more, well, the weather conditions were what they were, but those 3 takeaways were critical because they were sort of like the margins of error that you just couldn't make in that type of sloshy game. So you have 3 takeaways. Of course, the king himself, the master himself, Michael Jordan himself, Jesse Bates III did his thing. So of course that helped. My BFF Arnold Ebiketie did his thing on a critical 3rd down. So that was important as well. So there were all those kind of points, if you will, fumbles as well, where at critical moments, maybe you didn't have like this full-on performance for 60 minutes, but you got what you needed at those critical points. And I think going back to the run game, like you, Tori, I was a little bit surprised because I'm thinking, 31st run defense in the league, like this should be a thing. Like this is about to be a field day for the 3-headed monster. Not so much. And granted, the second half actually still looked better than the first half, because I think when you kind of look at the stats, it was like 2.6 yards per carry for Bijan Robinson in that first half. And then the numbers look more like 5 yards a carry in the second. So there was definitely an uptick. But I think to your point, Tori, when you see well over north of 200 yards against the Saints, a better run defense, and then you see under 100 against the Jets, it was a little puzzling. But as we always say, a win is a win is a win. And we're going to deep dive a little bit more into this game and talk a little bit more about maybe someone who got a few more targets, incompetent or concerned. We'll talk about it in a second. But first, I want to tell you guys about BetterHelp. So if you think about the holiday season, right, the end of the year, it kind of brings some anxiety for some people because the holiday season may be one that reminds them of maybe a lost loved one, or there may be anxiety about going into a new year and whether or not you did all you came to do in 2023. No need to be anxious and no need to go through that alone. That's why you have a source and a resource like BetterHelp. So with BetterHelp, literally, it's the opportunity for you to talk to someone about how you're feeling and kind of deal with those issues and get tips and tools on your sadness or your anxiety, or even learning how to counteract things you might experience down the road. It's therapy or coaching that can really kind of bring a bright spot or a different perspective in an area of challenge. So if you've ever benefited from therapy or coaching like many of us have, this would be for you, because the other thing is this. If you're thinking about starting therapy, you can do it entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So you find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. You visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, guys. So let's take it a little bit deeper. We've been talking about some things that we're confident in, some things we're excited about, but maybe some things we're concerned about as well. So we take a look back on yesterday's game with Kyle Pitts. He was targeted early, targeted fairly often for Kyle Pitts. We're going to put that often in quotes. Caught the first pass of the game, had 8 targets, 4 passes for 51 yards is where he landed, including a critical pass down the stretch. So, Aaron, my question to you is this. Are you confident that maybe this is a good sign for what we'll see out of KP going forward and how he's targeted the rest of the season? Or are you concerned that the Falcons maybe still haven't figured out how to fully utilize 8?
I'm confident that we'll see Kyle Pitts continue to produce at this level. I think yesterday's game was going to be a really good one for the Pitts-Ridder rapport to sort of measure it, because you figured with the Jets cornerbacks that they would probably be pretty effective at keeping the Falcons outside receivers in check in this game. And so you needed somebody else to step up. And, obviously Kyle Pitts and Bijan are like the 2 guys that you would think would be that. And, you would probably prefer it to be Pitts rather than Bijan, because that's probably meaning you're checking the ball down a lot. And, that's a whole different thing. But I think you saw Ridder show a confidence in Kyle Pitts that you wanted to see in throwing some tight window balls. He's like some of those times where it was just like kind of 50-50 balls where it's just like go box out that defender down the field. And I think Pitts had like 1 or 2 drops on those situations. So he didn't always back up that sort of confidence. But I think that's what you need to see, because we see it all the time with Desmond Ridder and Drake London, where it's just kind of just like Drake's down there somewhere, I'm going to throw it. And usually he'll go make the play. And you haven't really seen that sort of confidence and that rapport and that relationship with Ridder and Pitts at this point. And so I think yesterday's game was a good step forward for those 2 guys in that regard. So I feel more confident now that this is going to be something that we'll continue to see the rest of the year.
Yeah, and especially, Tori, when you think about the fact that that's the kind of game where you want to be safe, you want to be careful with your throws, but showing that kind of confidence in those conditions, yeah, that could do a lot for you just as a player in terms of your mental. And not saying, Tori, that the coaching staff didn't have confidence, but it is the type of thing where you're saying, hey, I can trust you in touchy situations to be able to deliver.
Yeah, and I don't think that, and I want to say this as like straightforward as I can, but I don't think we've seen a 100% Kyle Pitts yet. I think this is a guy who, I know the norm almost to this extent is that a guy has a season-ending injury, whether it be Achilles or knee or whatever, and they go and have surgery and they work and they rehab and they come back and they're fine and they don't miss a step. And that's kind of become the measuring stick, but that's not always been the norm. That there's a lot of times where you have a guy have an injury and he's a millisecond slower or doesn't have the same twitch or anything like that. And I think that there's the mental part of it, to be able to trust that you're healthy and that you actually physically are 100%. And I think that that's something that and I haven't like talked to Kyle to ask him this exact question. I don't even know if he would answer it, but I really do think that the Kyle Pitts that we saw in his rookie year, is it the same Kyle Pitts that we're seeing now? No. And I think that is okay, but we have to see the evolution of Kyle Pitts and the way that he's used and everything like that. And so I do think that yesterday was a really good opportunity to see that, with the conditions being what they are or what they were. And also, I think you see a drive in Kyle Pitts in the last few games that I almost missed seeing at the beginning of the year when maybe he wasn't getting targeted, because you saw him get like frustrated with himself. He had a drive. You saw him like get up, clap his hands. He was obviously frustrated. He knew he should have had it. I like seeing that emotion from Kyle, because Kyle's the type of person who I think he's trying to always like one up himself.
Yes.
And so I think this is really good to see that from Kyle, because I think it's going to, I think it almost like shows us that there could be better for Kyle as this season continues to go on.
And Jarvis, I just want to jump in real quick, because only to co-sign on what Tori was saying. That's why I was smiling so much, because in the back of my head, that was exactly going to be my follow-up. That what I loved most, maybe even more so than the 4 catches, was the fire in the catches he didn't make, because that tells you so much about who he is as a competitor, Jarvis. So much.
No, I'm just going to, for sure. And I think that to kind of better help usher in what Tori is talking about, because I wholeheartedly agree that Kyle isn't fully healthy. I don't think he's fully 100%. And I'm pretty sure he probably wouldn't answer that question. He'd probably answer it, but you wouldn't get anything out of it, Tori. So for me, though, I really feel like you can help usher this along by putting him in situations like I brought up earlier in the season. Like, don't have him lined up on the outside. Like, I really feel like you're kind of just wasting away. And after looking at the tape, I really felt like at the end of it, I was just like, I think we missed Mac Hollins a little bit, because I don't like seeing Kyle Pitts matched up with DJ Reed. Because he's obviously faster than him. Obviously he's full 100%. And then like certain balls that the way Desmond Ridder was throwing to Kyle Pitts, he's leading him. I'm just like, you don't need to be doing that. Like, he's a 6'6", 230-pound tight end. Put it on him. Line him up in the slot so he can be matched up against a safety or a linebacker. Those are the type of situations that Kyle needs to be in as he continues to try to get healthy. So I'm with you, Tori. I think this rapport between Ridder and Kyle can get a little bit better if he's put in situations where he can flourish. And I don't think he can flourish lining up on the outside against a number 2 corner that could potentially be a number 1 corner on any other team in the NFL.
And I think we're all in agreement that we're confident that it can only be better, but just a little bit concerned about making sure that Kyle Pitts is used in the right way so that we can see the potential that the 4 of us agree that he definitely has. Now, I kind of want to go into another area before we wrap up, just speaking of injuries, and hopefully this will be an optimistic conversation as the week goes on, but definitely in following Tori. Tori's been obviously out with Arthur Smith at today's press conference, and just kind of wanted to talk through that, Tori, because we got an update from him on AJ Terrell, of course, being in the concussion protocol, Nate Landman and Caleb McGarry both having knee injuries, but quote, thankfully it wasn't anything long-term. But interestingly enough, he also referenced Jeff Okudah, Drew Dahlman, and David Onyemata, and said those players might possibly have injuries. Wednesday is where it's going to tell a lot of whether or not they have a real shot for that Bucs game this coming Sunday, or if they're going to need a week. So Tori, I know that's a lot, kind of 6 players, kind of different categories, but kind of wanted to walk through your reaction of hearing that news and that follow-up from yesterday's game.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me, having been in New York or New Jersey and seeing kind of the conditions of the game. You knew, like, I mean, I just remember, I guess it was like Thursday or Friday, looking at the weather and seeing how bad it was going to be, and knowing that I didn't think there was any way that the Falcons were going to come out of there unscathed, and they didn't. There's a lot of guys who have some pretty significant injuries that I think are not significant. They're not season-ending injuries, but they're significant enough to where we could be talking about this into next week and maybe even 2 weeks from now. So with a divisional opponent with Tampa Bay coming in on Sunday, I'm really concerned that you're going to see a lot of these starters not be out there. And it's going to be the biggest test. If they aren't, if we get to Friday and we see a lot of these guys are doubtful or questionable or just completely ruled out, I really truly think that this is going to be the biggest test of Atlanta's depth that we have seen to this point. They've been talking about this depth, talking about it, saying we feel like we have good depth. This game against Tampa Bay, that depth will be tested.
And Jarvis, I want to come to you on that one, because we kind of alluded to it yesterday, and I want to follow up because Tori mentioned it, want to go back to it, and Free, I want you to kind of chime in as well. We talked about where would the area of most concern be if there is an issue with someone being unable to go on Sunday. And we talked about that linebacker core and how there was probably that's the biggest concern where maybe they're the thinnest, or maybe you're not as competent if you hear, especially like you think about. And I'm going to throw Nate Landman out there only because he's been kind of one of our favorites of being like a bright spot that we never knew we needed or never knew we were going to get. And so that's one of them. But, Jarvis, going back to what we talked about yesterday, and even looking back, what are we talking, like week 7? Yeah, it's a 16-13 win. And I think the Bucs are more than still beatable again. But who's that guy or guys who, if they don't go, you're most concerned about taking on this Bucs team Sunday?
It would have to be with that linebacker core, because I think that the way Caden Ellis and Landman have been playing together, I really feel like those guys have been really solid together. And I know people will probably say, okay, AJ Terrell is a number 1 corner, he's CB1. All right, I get it. But like, you have some guy, and then now if you're telling me Okudah might be out too, that's when I get concerned, because Aaron, you know where I'm going with this one. If we talk about Mike Hughes and Clark Phillips lining up on the outside, like, I don't know. But just based off of what we know now, hey, if Nate Landman misses, that would be my biggest concern as of right now, because I feel like Clark Phillips did a really, really solid job. It's in the run game too, being able to defend the run and coming up, because anytime you look at a guy like Clark Phillips, the guy's not the biggest guy in the world. He may be 165, let me say 165. I'm being disrespectful. Sorry. About 175, 180, dripping wet, and probably about 5'8", 5'9". Like, those guys aren't the guys that you see come flying up trying to get in there and make a tackle. So I think that secondary should be fine, given the circumstances. But if we're talking about Nate Landman, missing this game against a divisional opponent, and that I just feel like that's not a recipe for success in my eyes.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'm thinking of is I probably have the concern the same with probably the linebackers, and maybe a little bit for the O-line, like Caleb McGarry. Although I thought that as the game wore on, the Falcons ended up being, I'm going to say okay, I'm going to use that term loosely, but when I look at the numbers, and Tampa Bay got the win, but let's remember it was against Carolina yesterday. So there's that. But I still feel like for the most part, the Falcons will be fine. But again, like Jarvis said, just as long as in a particular room, in a particular position group, we're not talking about, more than one starter away from that group for next week.
Yeah. I think you could probably pick any of these guys that you would be a little concerned about, specifically with this Bucs matchup, because we've struggled to cover Mike Evans even when AJ Terrell was healthy, and now you're potentially putting Clark Phillips on. That's like, it feels like 9 inches of a height difference between those two guys. So that could create some problems.
Space Drake London though. But
yes,
Drake have had some battles.
No, but that's good that you mentioned that, because we talked about that yesterday. Like he held his own, but I mean, still good point taken though. Free, keep going.
Yeah, and then you look at Caleb McGarry. He's had some tough outings against like Shaq Barrett and those guys, and so is that going to be a bigger challenge for Storm Norton? And you see what Cade Otton did the last time, and we've seen the Falcons kind of struggle to cover tight ends the last couple of weeks, and now if you're taking a step back at that linebacker position, does that problem become an even bigger issue at this point? So I think all of those injuries could be impactful in this matchup. And I think Tori's right. Like, the Falcons have been pretty fortunate for the most part of avoiding the injury bug this year, outside of a handful of guys that have missed time, including Grady Jarrett. And so, they haven't really had to deal with their depth being tested to a huge degree outside of a couple of select spots. So I think having those issues this week will certainly test them, but we'll see how they fare against this Bucs team.
Indeed. When we come back, we're going to go around the Metro, and we're going to talk about an amazing celebration of an amazing life that happened yesterday, and also look ahead to that Falcons-Bucs game. But before we do that, Jarvis is here to tell us about Game Time and Subtext.
Listen up, folks. Jarvis Davis here for Game Time. Also, guys, I'm telling you, Have you ever been in a situation where you're trying to find some tickets? Well, Game Time has got you covered. Locked On NFL is the code you need to use for $20 off. Locked On NFL is the code you need to use for $20 off. And because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all events, sports, music, comedy, and theater right near you. They have killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, because I know you get stressed out. I know you were struggling trying to find tickets for the SEC championship. I hope your team won. But their Game Time has got all that stuff figured out. And plus, it has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. And even an hour after it starts, it's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with zone deals, you pick the section, and Game Time pick the seats for an average of 18% savings. So go ahead and use that code Locked On NFL and go to Game Time to check them out, and make sure that you know that Game Time is the place to find those last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Listen up, guys. Jarvis Davis here for Locked On Sports Atlanta. I need you to go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSportsAtlanta. Joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSportsAtlanta. And that is the place you need to go to if you want to become a Locked On Sports Atlanta insider, where you get text updates during the games. You also get breaking news, and plus you get all 22 review. You get my breakdowns on Mondays and Tuesdays, and whatever day you actually check your phone, because it's going to sit directly there. Here's the deal. All you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSportsAtlanta, and you're going to be offered a 2-week trial. And if you like it, you can stick around and pay the $4.99 for a monthly fee to become a Locked On Sports Atlanta insider. So make sure you go there, Locked On Sports Atlanta, and join subtext.com/LockedOnSportsAtlanta and become a Locked On Sports Atlanta insider today.
So Robert Saleh and several Jet staff members, along with some Falcon staff members, honored the late Greg Knapp by running the steps inside the stadium before Sunday's game. Knapp, of course, unfortunately passed away on July 22nd of 2021 when he was hit by a car while riding a bike near his home in California. They call it the Knapp Stair Climb, and it's been done in support of the Coach Knapp Memorial Fund to raise funds for distracted driving awareness. Guys, if you've ever come across Greg Knapp, you know what kind of a really gentle and wonderful human being he was. So just to kind of see it on TV, or if you were there to see it in person, I'm sure it was powerful as well. But just, Tori, I'm thinking about and this kind of takes me back to my former days, which I used to be a cyclist, not anymore. But whenever I see this, I always, makes me smile, because I knew he was an avid cyclist as well. How cool was it just to see, and great was it to see that one of the kindest guys I know I've ever come across and ever had a chance to interact with was honored that way.
I think it's fantastic. And, I never had the opportunity to meet Greg Knapp in person because I didn't start covering the team until pandemic 2020. But just having seen the impact that he had on the Atlanta Falcons organization, but also people who are still in the Atlanta Falcons organization. I think of someone like Sarah Hogan, who's been there for years. I know y'all know Sarah, and how much she put into this cause. And I know that they really with the whole My Cause, My Cleats, which that game was this Sunday, they had there were so many of them that were wearing shoes instead of cleats for Greg Knapp's Memorial Foundation. And so it's just great. You really appreciate people coming together like that.
Yeah, I really, for me, seeing it was a beautiful thing. I don't know, Jarvis, I know, I think you've had an opportunity to interact with Greg as well.
Yeah, for sure. And he's one of the, how every time during the springtime you get a chance to talk to assistants, which is really cool, because
it is
those are the real football nerds. Nothing against Arthur Smith, but those guys are really dialed in when it comes to anything football related. And one thing that, you just know, he was just a student of the game. He just understood ball. because I asked him maybe 1 or 2 questions, and we had like a 7-minute conversation. So anytime you get guys to start talking like that, and you could just tell, like, you just feel people, right?
Yeah.
I like to feel like I got a good feel for people, and you just feel being around him that he's just an all around good person. And my interactions with him were very cool and just real soft and pleasant. And just being around him, and just to see that on Sunday, how they honor him and everything like that, because it was a truly sad situation. Like, you really felt it when they announced that unfortunate incident had happened. So, but now just to continue, just to have his legacy continue to live on and honor him in that way, and something that he was very passionate about in cycling, I really feel like that is just a cool thing to see. And just condolences to the family and everything like that, because, like I said, Napper, as Matt Ryan likes to affectionately refer to him as, it's just really cool. He just makes you smile.
Definitely. And also kudos to the Jets and Falcons organizations. This is one of the things that we don't talk about a lot on the show, but the Falcons have always been very, very respectful and very, very thoughtful about how they honor people, but also in their connectivity to the community. So I appreciated it, even from a distance, being able to witness that show of support and affection and respect. Now, switching gears of someone and a team that we don't give a flying flip about respecting, that would be the Bucs. So, Aaron Freeman, tell me how I know, thank you. I try. But, try to keep it a little bit light going out, especially for a team that we could care less to do anything but stomp on their necks. When they get here Sunday, how in the world do the Falcons trounce and trample all over the Bucs so that they can continue to keep space in the NFC South?
Well, I think it gets back to something Tori mentioned with, what she thought was going to be this Jets game. Kind of run the football. Like the last time the Falcons played the Bucs, they weren't like super efficient running the ball, but they were just very committed to running the football. I think they ran the ball like 40 times in that week 6 game, I think it was. And they just, and you didn't have Bijan play in that game. And so now you're like, okay, well, we got a taste of the 2-headed monster, but now, let's give this Bucs team a taste of the 3-headed monster this week.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. Like, that was so much fun just to kind of see not 1, not 2, but all 3 of those guys, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and Cordero Patterson, go off. So yeah, it'll be good to see if we can get a repeat, put that on repeat at the Benz later this weekend. Again, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us as always. And thank you for not just our shenanigans, but also letting us honor someone whom we love and respect in Greg Knapp. Don't forget, guys, whenever you want to get that good football talk, it's right here. Why? Because this is the best Falcons football talk anywhere around. So thanks again for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, party doesn't stop here. Tomorrow we'll be right back talking dogs on the Atlanta Football Party. See you then.